Cole's last record was underwhelming.
Yeah.
But
that's J. Cole's middle fucking name.
It was, you know, I listened to it a few times, like trying to piece together a narrative, because that's what we all sort of force these days when we get somebody of quality in our hands. We're just like, no, this all means something. We tend to get into it just a bit too much. And I think if you know, there were a few tracks that were kind of silly. I was obsessed with I was obsessed with I want to fold clothes.
I want to fold clothes for you.
Several weeks. For several weeks, I was obsessed with it. Neighbors Think I'm Selling Dope. There were a lot of tracks in it that were of quality, but I don't know. I don't know if I did myself a disservice for expecting something well put together, because as they stand, I would say about 4 to 5 records on the album were decent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I thought there was at least a handful of great tracks on the album, but the thing is, like, you know, J. Cole, I don't think is a bad artist. I wouldn't put him down there sort of in the recycle bin with a lot of other rappers who I hear these days, especially a lot of the trendy ones, the ones that have no substance whatsoever, the ones that have no personality whatsoever and just sound like a copy of something else. To me, J. Cole doesn't sound like a copy of something else. He sounds like himself. But the thing about J. Cole is every time, without fail, and I hope it changes one day, but every time without fail, like, he falls so short of dropping something great. And the amount of distance between what he's doing and a To Pimp a Butterfly or a Good Kid Mad City or even a Section 80 is just so glaringly apparent. You know, because you listen to that album, his latest record, and there's very clearly a narrative there. There's clearly a story going on. There's clearly some kind of theme happening there. But, like, whether it was through a lack of tracks or a lack of lyrics or just a lack of just obvious direct narrative connections, like, those tracks were not coming together. That story was not coming together. Like, it only became apparent through, like, a series of telephone-like suggestions over the internet where people were like, oh, wait, this track means this and this track means this. And he's kind of rapping from this guy's standpoint. Like, and the thing is, to me, that's not like putting in the effort to get it because what the artist put together is really cryptic and really deep and really heady and like, whoa, it took you a while to figure it out. Like, that's it taking a while to figure out because the artist did a bad job of putting it together. Yeah. You know, like, they didn't weave together a coherent story. And that's why it took you a while to get it. Not because it was super deep and just, like, you know, really difficult to understand. It just wasn't well put together. It was like a series of loose vignettes that all kind of came from the same place. And it only took, like, a little bit of sleuthing online for people to, like, kind of piece it together. But now that it's finally there, it's just like, man, if that's the story, like, I feel like you could have said so much more. Like, what about this? Or what about that? It's like, you don't have this, you don't have anything to say about this other thing over here. Like, it just seems like it's so messily and so weakly put together that it doesn't have any punch to it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think this is the closest J. Cole has come to putting together a great conceptual album. But every time he just falls so demonstrably
You enjoyed
short.
this more than Forest Hills?
Yeah, I did. I think so. Forest Hills, I thought, was kind of sonically underwhelming from beginning to end. This one I felt like, you know, had a little bit more of a story to it, was a little bit more engaging. But the thing is, like, only by a shade, you know? Like, this is probably the closest I came to really digging on one of his albums. But the more I started listening to it, the more I was like, you know, again, that sort of weakly put together project, that weakly put together concept and theme, I feel like is ultimately what bites J. Cole in the ass every time, because, like, he clearly puts together enough effort for it to be hinting in that direction, but, like, when you really dive down into it, it's like this is falling short. Like, there's something missing here. I don't know if you feel the same way.
I think you mentioned what's part of the reason why he's on this list, and of course, neither of us think that he is one of the 10 worst rappers. We don't.
But he did get a lot of suggestions.
But he got the suggestions, so he's being discussed. So I just want to make that clear. But I think the Kendrick comparison, him just sort of being viewed as a poor man's Kendrick. If you listen to Black Friday, that song sort of illustrates his whole career, at least the way people look at him in terms of being considered the best in the game. And one thing that I think shoots us all in the foot is that we've always had this thought that there can only be one guy that brings us there. There's only one guy who can be socially aware, who can sell records, who can feel like he's actually making great music, and he's making different sounds. He's appeasing even those that know music on a deep level. We only believe that only one person can stand on that throne. And right now it's Kendrick. And this isn't Cole's fault. He's sort of just working as a poor man's Kendrick, kind of like, the way Rob Lowe kind of worked as like a low rent Brad Pitt in a sense.
I mean, do you think that's a product of the times?
That's a product of that's us. That's what we turned him into.
Do you think that's a product of now, or do you think that's kind of been an ongoing thing? Because I mean, 10 years ago, you saw a Talib Kweli and a Mos Def coexisting in the same world and collaborating together too, and beloved by fans of each artist, and nobody was necessarily coming to one and saying, oh, well, Mos is just like a really shitty Talib, or vice versa. You didn't really have that discussion.
You had different levels because these people were existing in different mediums, and now with the internet, obviously everything is just thrown into the same pot. So now since it's one big great thing, I think now it's really being magnified, and now you can really tell that this has always been an issue. The issue's always been this sort of odd, what I've always compared to be like this odd sort of tie to Christianity that we tend to have, where, we want a savior. Somebody's got to save hip hop. That's what's always being said. That's the language that we use. And Mos Def can coexist with, he can coexist at the same time when Jay-Z could coexist and 50 Cent could coexist. He'd be on BT. He's on MTV. You got the other guy just putting out random mixtapes. Now it's all one thing, and I think it's hurting J. Cole artistically. And obviously, commercially, it's not hurting him. I'm sure this did this thing go platinum? Did he go platinum with no features? Did he? Because that's what J. Cole does. He goes platinum with no features. God, I got so sick of hearing that shit.
I don't know. I haven't followed the sales on this new album.
Okay.
But I don't know. I feel like, as far as I agree with what you're saying to the extent that he's making music that sort of has a conscious edge to it, and he's getting lumped into the same, pot as Kendrick, because they're both kind of doing that, and they're both on that mainstream level. I mean, in the grander sense, I think hip hop is, Lil Yachty is not getting thrown into the same pot as Kendrick or Cole. Neither is Danny Brown or Open Mike Eagle or Run the Jewels or whatever. I feel like people are putting these artists in very different categories. Run the Jewels' latest record was probably their most conscious yet, with loads of social and political tracks, but nobody was coming at that record and just being like, oh, well, you're just making a conscious record now. You're just a poor man's whatever,
See, but Cole's so close to the light. He collaborates with him. I'm sure. If Killer Mike was making records with Kendrick.
And that's why I think, sort of the comparisons continued.
Yeah.
But
he's on his radar. He's in his radar.
Exactly. They're sort of around in the same area on the map.
Which, by the way, if Killer Mike and fucking Kendrick made a record together,
that'd be awesome.
That would be amazing.
But the thing is, even if that ended up being the case, I still think there wouldn't really be a comparison there, because Killer Mike is sort of seen as more of an OG.
Yeah.
Whereas Kendrick's more new. Kendrick has a totally different sound. So it's like, I think there's room to coexist. But the thing is, Cole, I think with his music, purposefully kind of puts himself in that situation. It does kind of have that jazzy tone to it. It does have that conceptual tone to it. It does have, him trying to address wider social issues. But again, as far as like his lyrics and the way he strings his concept together, he just falls miserably short of his competition. And I think that's just consistently why people say he's one of the worst rappers, because he just doesn't match up, I guess.
Yeah, I guess if this is all about personal potential or individual potential, then it would make sense that he would be on this list.
Sure.
I guess that would make sense.
Yeah.